The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Community Network. This is episode 100. For me, this is special that we've actually gotten to 100 episodes. We've been over 8 years in production of doing live events, which turns into this podcast. We've had over 4,000 attendees to our monthly live event. We've had 161,000 downloads of the podcast on all sorts of networks, from Spotify to Apple Podcast, of course, as well as all of the other different platforms that you use. And we've been listened to in over 156 countries. That to me is just outstanding. Gives a perspective of not just what's happening in the West, but also get a little bit more into how does Agile fit into, say, Germany, or when other people who join our live event chime in and they are giving us their perspective from India, South Africa, or how Agile fits in all of these different nations around the world. It's been really a cool journey. I can tell you that having done this show for this long, there's a number of things that come out to me. One of those, and I'm going to allow a couple people to talk that have been a part of the show for a while. If you guys listen to the archive, way back when we first started this podcast, you're going to hear Dan Walsh. Dan was a colleague of mine at Intel Corporation. I learned a lot from him. He was also a part of the internal ACN for Intel Corporation way back when, before we actually produced and moved that out to a podcast. Dan, did you want to share any insights of way back when and overall the journey that we've been through?
Yeah, I'm continually reminded, Ray, of how special that team was, and some of the thought leaders we brought into our internal conferences. David Hussman, Don Ryderson, David Snowden. I think it was just a pretty amazing time for me, at least in terms of my own learning journey. And I think a lot of the things that we were talking about 10 years ago are still super, super relevant today. And just congratulations on 8 years and 100 episodes. That's amazing.
I didn't think I'd last as long, personally. Also, I've got two other people here. Rhea.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, it's really exciting that this has kept going, and to see how it's grown worldwide is pretty incredible. I guess going back to the beginning, I remember sitting in a small conference room and loving the openness and vulnerability of just people that were trying to change ways of working, explore different techniques, ask open questions, and get advice from fellow practitioners who were trying to do the same thing. And that's like what stands out for me. It was a complete openness to learn and try and fail, but then learn from the failures together so that we all got better together. And I see that continuing over these 8 years. And I hope that continues forward, because that is the only way I think that we get through the complexity and the constant change that we're all facing, and really figure out improved ways of doing everything that we do.
Awesome. And there's one other person on here that actually took the internal ACN and continued it for a number of years internally. Darius?
Yes. Hi, Ray. Hello, everyone. For me, the work you have done with the entire group, this podcast and the coaching network, was extremely useful. And not only it was a valve which allowed me to survive some tough moments, but more importantly, it was a window to the world of thinking which was not familiar to me. So the enlargement of my perspective accomplished through the work of all of you only grows in importance as I get older. So I am hoping that this type of good work of people who help people to open their minds and reach for the boundaries which remained sometimes untouchable is extremely important. It has been fun. It has been enlightening. It has been really useful. And I really appreciate that. And I know many people do from all over the countries. I still am in touch with them. And the work you have been doing with the team still comes up quite often.
I'm quite surprised that most don't know what I really look like. I'm just a talking voice. I had one guy one time say, I turned on the camera and they go, "Oh, you're old." The other thing, though, is that I was at a conference one time and I was talking to somebody, and then somebody just ran across the room and go, "You're the dude from the ACN, aren't you?" People who've acknowledged and who listen and listen regularly really acknowledge the impact the show has had on them. How cool is that? So I wanted to bring in from some of the people who are the legacy of this show. All of them are awesome people, and they set the foundation for us to hit 100. Again, thank you. I think that overall, the impact that we do for the community, and this is a community of people that are not just people who've been doing Agile for a long time, but it's, as I've always said, it's also the new people. And us sharing our thoughts and our challenges. And that's because in some regards, all companies go through these natural cycles of different things that causes them to, unfortunately, go through some hard times. Agile isn't a silver bullet, neither is some of the other methods that we use. So keep in mind that as you go through your Agile career, that sometimes, things work out, sometimes they don't. The ACN is a sponsored program. Agile Alliance and a number of other different companies give us funding in order for us to bring on the show. We wouldn't be able to do it without support. Also, the members of New Agility, those dollars go into funding the podcast system and all the other different things as well. If you get a chance to go to acnpodcast.org, if you want to make a donation, or if you just want to go ahead and become a member of the ACN community, all those options are for you over there on acnpodcast.org. So let's get on with today's topic. I have been talking to a number of people who've, when they talk about Agile, it always comes into the form of both Agile and Lean together. And even in my journey, starting off in a manufacturing company, Lean was already in our environment. If you wanted to talk Lean throughout the fabs at Intel, that was all over the place. It was well practiced in a number of different teams. And Agile came in as, if you think of the 2001 manifesto, for us, it got introduced around 2003. And so we were birthed as both an Agile and a Lean organization. And the reason for this is that there's such a tight alignment between these two different ways of work. Granted, you talk to an Agilist and they say Lean is a really good Agile set of principles. And then the Lean people would say that Agile is a really good Lean set of principles as well. So if you think about customer value, continuous improvement, collaboration, simplicity, all of these different things made these two approaches very, very compatible with one another. And with that, think of the philosophy between these two, that if you think of the mindset of eliminating waste and optimizing the value stream and all those things. And if I dig into the Agile portion, they have a lot of the similar things. If you think about us doing retrospectives, it can be compared to what we do with Kaizen events and Lean. If we go look at Kanban as an example, Kanban is the methodology that's used in the heart of Scrum. If you look at the methods I used And I felt that these were simpatical with what we do in doing continuous improvement and also improvement of overall teams and organizations, which I think Lean does get into the space of more organizational value delivery. Because if I were to go optimize with Scrum and I hear the old 400% improvement in team delivery performance, and if you think of that, if the rest of the system is slow, or it just goes into you do your software delivery and it waits like for 30 days someplace before going to a customer, that optimization that you've done in your Scrum team really 400% turns into a 1% improvement to the customer's view. And Lean gives us an ability through the value stream mapping and other things to be able to talk about the complete system so that the customer, from their perspective, they don't think about 5 different teams that they're dealing with. They're dealing with one company. They want to deal with one company. They don't want to deal with all your internal teams. And so Lean actually gives a toolkit in order to, I think, enhance Agile very well. So with that, the questions to get us started is, do you use Lean within your company along with Agile? Do you use those two things together? Give a few examples of how it helps. And also, if you have some examples of how it didn't help, that also would be something to hear as well. Beyond Lean, I'd like to know what other methods have you used along with Agile that actually benefited your teams? If you don't have a Lean example, maybe there's another sort of similar methodology that we would like to discover here today, and you can share that with everyone. And then the last one is 8 years. We've been running different formats for this show. How, over the next 100 episodes, how do we improve for the ACN? I'd love to get your feedback on that. Dan, you want to go answer these questions? You're a deep Lean guy, so I thought you would be a good one to start with.
Yeah, I certainly, like you said, I grew up in the fabs and started my own professional journey on the Lean path and did quite a bit of Lean transformation work and was introduced to Agile through you and others at Intel. And maybe that's just my own background, but I've always viewed Agile methods and approaches almost through a Lean lens. It's in software development, but at this point, they are so intertwined and convoluted in my mind that it's all kind of one big hairy ball. I don't particularly find a lot of utility in terms of teasing apart the hairy mess. I'm absolutely in the camp of fit for purpose methods and practices and listening to the feedback the system is giving you, going to the Gemba and directly observing how value gets created is super important. And whether you call that Lean or Agile, doesn't matter so much to me anymore. It's the results and the customer outcomes and the employee satisfaction you get from having a vibrant workplace
that matters. Thank you for that. Diana, how about you? What do you have on this?
It's interesting listening to Daniel because I had a similar journey. My work before I was introduced to even the methods, even before there was an Agile manifesto and I was introduced to extreme programming, I had already been using Lean methods long before that and total quality. My work primarily was in silicone wafer fabs and other kinds of high-tech manufacturing work. And Agile is what actually began introducing me more to IT and software development, was my awareness of that. And I always found it very powerful. And you probably wouldn't be surprised to discover that the Lean total quality commitment to continuous improvement is what led me and Esther to say retrospectives are going to be important to Agile. And continuous improvement is so important in Lean. The Agile Retrospectives book came out of, and we included 5 whys and fishbone diagrams and things in the first edition of Agile Retrospectives because we already knew those were very important tools. So, and the devotion to collaborative work and all those other things that you had listed, I was doing because of my commitment to Lean. The other thing I was committed to, and that I also think it fits well now that we've begun talking at least as much about the enterprise as we do about teams, is organization design theory and practices. And so that I have included, and the complexity way people think about in complexity and chaos theory, and how that influences both Lean and Agile. For instance, in Lean, there isn't a devotion to root cause analysis, but those of us who've become immersed in the world of complexity, root cause is really hard to find when things become emergent properties. And the thing that just happened in our workplace may have happened because a variety of other things were happening along the way. And so they don't have roots, right? As Dan says in the comments. And there are a number. I also think it's really important as we become more mature in our ability as Agile coaches or Scrum Masters or Agile, but any kind of Agile practitioner, that we look at what other movements, communities, and things are out there that have practices that we may want to look seriously at, like beyond budgeting. There's a lot of more human-centered, the corporate rebels and the work that they're doing and so on. So I think it's useful to, even though we may have a devotion to Agile or Lean or Agile and Lean, we also want to still look beyond those boundaries and see what else can be beneficial to the organizations we work with.
So a question for you, because you bring up that the fact that complex cases don't have root cause. That doesn't sit well with management sometimes. How do you deal with that?
It depends on who. I'm a consultant, right? I'm an advisor. It depends on the person who's sitting in front of me, how I deal with that. I try to know their situation and their mindset well enough that I can find the right analogies and the right analogous kinds of situations that they may have been in to be able to talk about what is complexity. And almost anybody who's in a leadership, upper level leadership position now knows VUCA, knows that term, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So even if I just need to refer to Harvard Business Review and that 2017 article about VUCA, I can use that as a kind of a way in. Is this a person who likes theories? I can give them theories. Is this a person who likes experience reports about complex versus root cause? I can give them those experience reports. Customize the way I'm interacting with folks and their questions with the things that are going to fit them best. Like I say, I'm not in the convincing business. I will tell my stories, and then they will either convince themselves and decide they want to do it, or we will decide that we're not a good fit. So
thank you for that. Scott, what do you have on this?
What Diana was talking about struck a chord with me with looking beyond Agile and Lean. And I've looked at things and tried to incorporate things from like Management 3.0 or domain-driven design or liberating structures or just out researching anything. And then I had someone come to me and they're like, how do I know what you're telling me is right? And should I even listen to you? And I'm like, that's a great question. I think we should all be looking at it. Somehow I told my answer to that question was, I try to look at anything like take Management 3.0. I just look back at the Agile Manifesto and I try to compare and say, does this thing try to live up to the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto? If the answer is yes, then I tend to move forward with it. If the answer is no, I tend to leave it aside. So yeah, I completely agree with what Diane was talking about as far as reaching beyond Agile and Lean, because there's a million things out there that fit within the values and the principles that the Agile Manifesto is trying to promote, a lot of those things will help your team be better tomorrow than they are today.
Fully agree. I think we need more oxygen in the room sometimes, because some of these bigger things, like right now, AI is sucking in all the oxygen in the room. So it doesn't leave much breath for other methods and other things. So we need to create more oxygen. I'm not sure how we do that. Randy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it. One thing I just also wanted to mention real quick, you mentioned the name of David Hussman.
Yeah.
I did have the pleasure of meeting the man in Chicago. He ran the Agile Day Chicago, and it was a big loss. I learned so much from that man in a very, very short amount of time. I did want to say that in my journey, my practice, I've really been focusing on trying to use a lot of Kanban type of practices we're pretty much a Scrum shop. And I really leaned on the flow metrics, through using the flow metrics to try and help with process improvement constantly. And I think that really resonated with a lot of people, but it is hard to get that across to management, because of course management feels that the sooner we start something, the sooner we're going to get something done. Instead of working on 10 things at once, maybe we should only work on 5 things at once and get them done sooner.
Fully agree. Just the fact that capacity, the concepts of capacity, is something that I think more management needs to dig into. Darius, what's up?
Yes, I'm glad to hear about context specific, about complexity, but I want to suggest a perspective which is vastly underappreciated and underdeveloped. I think we have to start taking seriously into consideration the human aspects. Human in the sense how humans contribute to the chaos or to the mess, and how humans can cope with this. Our ability to adapt and determine properly what is appropriate in the context is vastly undermined. And the inability in the corporate world to see challenges other than technical, challenges which mostly relate to humans, adaptive challenges, which, if I had to define it quickly, are the challenges which relate to missing capacities in people. How to develop those capacities and how to move beyond lean and agile is going to be absolutely critical. I will give you one story to visualize what I am trying to say here. There are things which we should not be attempting because they lead nowhere. You cannot travel faster than speed of light as a particle, right? You cannot build perpetuum mobile, which is the machine which is going to propel itself without external source of energy. And trying to do this would be fallacy. However, we went from steam engine to internal combustion to electric, hydrogen, because we worked hard on those things. When it comes to how we can work together better, how we can see the context, how we can organize our work better, we don't seem to have much appetite to move beyond lean and agile. And going to the complexity and what is appropriate and how to develop those capacities is going to be absolutely critical. This is where we have to put our efforts, and this I would apply to corporate company life, organizational life, but also social, political, etc. It's not having a new king. It's how quickly we can correct errors and make it better. That's how it works.
Fully agree with you on that. Most companies, when times get tough, tend to take the people who are improving the organization, and those are the first people they let go. And that's unfortunate. Dennis, you have your hand up. What do you have on this topic? That's okay.
Great. Dennis figures out his microphone. Let me chime in on that notion of the people improving the organization.
Go for it.
Are the ones that are let go. This is my passion area. I'll just be quick here. I was trying to fill the gap. those folks in an organization that are seeking to lean in to create the change, clear the obstacles for others, we call those change agents. And my passion is really about helping organizations protect and nurture those change agents, because many change agents from a previous life at Intel are on this call. And one of the challenges that organization had was it couldn't tell the difference between an employee and a change agent and didn't know how to protect them. I think as whether we look at Agile or Lean or any movement, one of the big opportunities is to lean into change agent skills as leaders protecting change agents in organizations, because they are the adaptability factor that organizations need, because they're the people who seek out new information, work to apply that new information, and to Darius's point, correct the gaps between the organizational ideas and reality real time. So a world with AI without change agents is chaos. And so I think we need a lot more change agents, and really grateful to everybody here. He's likely a change agent, which is why you're here.
Thank you for that. Dennis, you got your mic on?
Okay. My mic is on.
There we go.
All right. I found some notes from a talk that was given to us by Jim Copleen in 2009. Now, I worked for Lucent at that point in time. Jim had left Lucent in about 2002, I think. But he'd come back and visit us every once in a while. And he did a talk about Agile and Lean and why you need both. And he talked about the difference. The core of Agile is self-organization. Lean, however, emphasizes process improvement. Lean is about high throughput. Agile is about low latency. And there's more chaos in Agile. Agile is better for complex systems because self-organization helps you solve those kinds of problems. Lean is better for complicated systems where the whole is just the sum of the parts. Like in manufacturing, that usually happens. He says use Agile in situations where you can benefit from faster feedback. And that's things like unknown requirements or fast evolving requirements. But be ready to use some Lean tools. So things like set-based development are very useful when you're in an Agile project. I said, I lean more Agile, but I Agile more Lean.
I think that's one of the early discoveries that we saw was specifically, I was in middle management when I started my Agile journey. And I could tell you the Lean stuff was resonating because the issues that we were dealing with wasn't the team's production. It was actually how it was distributed through the system. And in big companies, this seems to be the bigger issue. Thanks for your comments. One other thing that I was noticing in the chat about David Hussman, and bring him up one more time. He had a profound influence on what we were doing way back when. He came and spoke at our Lean and Agile development conference twice. And I've got a chance to go over to the East Coast and speak at a couple of his events. And he invited me to Disney to speak at one of their events. The guy was a connector. He would connect people together. And I think that's one thing that's very much missed about him is the fact that how he brings people together was amazing. We should just go create a Dev Jam conference and get sued by whomever, but just go grab the name. Anyway, Jorg, what do you have on this topic?
Yeah, interesting things. And I actually started out on Agile side because I started from software and development side and then learned the Lean perspective. And for a long time, I thought it's pretty much similar. And then I noticed when you talk to management, it's significantly different because sometimes they hear software if you say Agile and they hear production if you say Lean. In both terms, they hear faster and cheaper, which isn't the essence of either. But if you want to open ears, you need to be aware which of the buzzwords really gets attention. And I've seen and talked to people who were very deep into lean production, and they were really flabbergasted by thinking of self-organizing teams because they had a strict production. They wanted to improve it. And then they had suddenly a team who would freely improve that production. And then I said, now look at the agile method and think about giving them a retrospective and stuff. If you're really stuck in one corner, and I've seen the other thing with software people who just don't get that there are limits to what you're allowed to do in production. You need to know where you are. And then if you, in both worlds, things come together, generates a third thing, because you can then combine, again, the perspectives as with opinions. If you have two people arguing, the third opinion probably is the best as it emerges out of the discussion. And I think this is as well true for all the principles and ways to do things. And yep, that's my view on Agile and Lean. And for inspiration, I'm actually trying to pick up things that are related but come from anywhere. If it's history or current things, I just came across an interview with the rather high-ranking officer from the Marines, don't remember his name, but he said, our people are never resources because we never want to expand them. We know we're going to kill them if it's really in the need of the mission, but they are really assets. They really matter. And bringing that back just as a discussion to management was pretty interesting, because some people immediately got that, yeah, you want to preserve your assets, so it's a difference. And the other said, we don't get the difference. Assets get asset numbers, so what's the difference?
I agree to that full-heartedly. I'm not a resource. I'm a human.
Yes.
Hey, Ray, what do you have?
Yeah, just thinking like the Agile and Lean, like what draws them together in my mind, a core component is the curiosity and continuous curiosity of how are things working? How do they work? How could we try something new? And this like always stood with me. I had the opportunity to hang out with Ward Cunningham, one of the creators of the Agile Manifesto, many times, and learned so much of how he approached things. And he said to me one time that his favorite part of the Agile Manifesto was what they didn't write down. And what I got from hanging around a lot of those people, unfortunately, we had the benefit of inviting a lot of very interesting people like Husman to our events and just learning about how they thought, how they approached things, that really helped to, I think, solidify a lot of these ideas in my mind, that it wasn't just what was written down, it was that constant curiosity and asking questions. And what I love about Lean is that it's everybody's responsibility. Like Agile kind of puts that in, hey, we're constantly learning as teams, but it puts a lot of responsibility too in leaders, that it's not their job to uphold the system. It's to really ask questions about the system, go to the Gemba, empower everyone at the company to improve the flow of value and change the system how they can. But if it's blocking the flow, the leader can then change the system if it's not working. I feel like we've, in a lot of ways, that idea of leadership has been lost. I constantly return to that because I think that if we can be curious about how we're working, constantly changing or challenging our assumptions and how we're doing things as things evolve and change, because what's working now and what worked at a certain point in time might not be the best way of approaching it for a changing environment or changing circumstances.
I'm curious along the lines of, I expected in a lean house that everyone is improving, and in an agile house, you would expect the continuous improvement was going on, and it's something that everyone owns. What do you think happens when you talk to a team member and they say, I have to go ask the product owner if we have the time to do this, or I have to ask permission? What's that a sign of for that supposed agile team or lean team?
Maybe the product owner is a micromanager. It's not really their job to they don't maybe understand their job of how things are being done. It's more the delivery of value. Maybe not have empowerment of the team member to determine like how the best way to work in order to provide the value of the product owner is saying that needs to be delivered. Is I'm sure there's multiple reasons behind that, but ultimately we've forgotten that balance and the different roles as for Scrum. Well, we're using Scrum terms, so we're in a Scrum situation. It's the team absolutely owns the how, and if they want to try something new and figure out a more innovative way to do things to deliver that value faster, that should absolutely be within their empowerment.
Absolutely. Fully agree. Tammy, what do you have?
I wanted to share my experience starting off in lean manufacturing. I was in middle management with the senior leadership on why can't the business apply lean as effectively as manufacturing. And so that led my journey, which ultimately ended up being an agilist for an organization, so intercompany agilist. And my experience with lean led me to a great definition of what is operational excellence. And it's when each and every employee can see the flow of value to the customer and fix that flow before it breaks down without supervision. And I was able to take the lean concepts along with this definition and take a process that took 30 days down to one business day. And the way that I did that, I use in my Agile coaching. One is visualize the flow so everyone knows what's in progress and focusing on finishing the work rather than focusing on starting the work. Then making sure that work entering the flow is ready for work, because that was the biggest thing that was slowing this 30-day process, is it was looping through multiple times because it wasn't really ready to work. So they couldn't deliver it to the customer because it just wasn't in a ready state. So by getting it ready before it enters the flow, it only took 24 hours to get it through. And the other thing is making sure that there is that opportunities to pause and reflect in that continuous improvement, that PDCA type of thing. I use that with my Agile teams as we're looking for opportunities to improve and focusing on, like I said, finishing the work.
Awesome. I want to come work for you. I think you got it figured out there.
Yeah.
Thank you for those comments. Hendrik.
Yeah, I think a lot of great things have been said around the whole thing. Maybe one comment, what Jörg was talking about, this thing about resources and better talk about people. There's a new word I came across in a conversation with someone from Morningstar. They talk about colleagues. And somehow I like that because it has this notion of, it's not just any people, it's really colleagues. It's people I work with or with whom I create value. That's a term I really started to a lot. Yeah, then I thought maybe we can tune the whole thing also a bit towards your third question. So where should this go? Because now we are not the Agile Coaching Network, we are the Agile Community Network, and that opens new possibilities. Things I come out of originally waterfall, lean kind of project management, and Agile was for me like freeing up everything and making the company more likely to succeed because people could really learn continuously. This notion of continuous learning in a complex environment was a big discovery, but it doesn't stop there. And one thing that I started to look a lot into are things like, for example, how do companies build strategies? And the fantastic work of Simon Wardley, for example. And those are the kind of topics I would say we could maybe also touch upon in the future in this community, because I would like to hear also from all these wonderful people that are joining us every month. How are their companies, for example, going about strategy, and how do they align people around strategies?
And yeah, I don't mean OKRs, by the way.
No, I agree with that. I think one of the things that I'd like to see people come in and just share with us what their company is doing. I think a long time ago, I used to go visit different companies and see what they were doing. And there was so much value in that.
Yeah.
Just see that directly.
There's so much discovery beyond the frameworks and the agile practices. And it would be wonderful to hear of these unexpected discoveries that we have in this huge community.
I fully agree. Scott, I'm going to pick on you because you've been putting in lots of great comments in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and activate your microphone. What would you like to add to this?
The other thing I was thinking about when Diana was talking and the gentleman before her was, you had mentioned value stream mapping as part of Lean, which we currently use at the state of Minnesota as we're trying to transform into a more agile organization by transforming from projects to products, and value stream mapping has been a big part of that. So again, looking to incorporate different, it's not just agile, it's agile in many other things. So whatever tool in your tool belt you can use, and we've used value stream mapping to great success to help us transform from that project mindset to the product mindset, which has then led us to have agile teams that are long-lived, where to me is where you really get the great advantage, or one of the great advantages of agile over waterfall is you're not taking project teams and breaking them up every 6, 9, 12, 18 months and scattering them to the wind to work on different projects, that they support the product for the life of the product. And then that capacity is fungible, and that team can move as a team if that product were to go away to support some other product. And so I was just thinking about, it's not just agile. There's a lot of different things that in the course of the journey of a team that you start to incorporate to try to help that team. But it's all around trying to live up to those agile values and principles at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think long-lived teams is a hard concept for a number of different companies. And I do remember a flashback story. I was a part of the original 286, 386 design team a long time ago. And this team was in Santa Clara, and I journeyed to different sites over my career. And I remember coming back 15, 16 years later, and I was walking through one of the hallways, and I just spotted the names of all of my old teammates that I had left. And they were all still together, still working. They weren't working on microprocessors anymore. They were working on some other chipsets. But it was just amazing to me to see that team, one, loved working together so much. No one broke them apart. They stayed together for a long time. Very high-performing team. And I think high-performing teams does need to be a core of this.
Multiple comments here, but regarding the third point, I am still reminiscing the trip to John Deere or visit with Edgar Schein. And someone made an interesting proposal that maybe it would be possible to take it offline and virtually do it by learning what people are doing, what they think we should be doing, to travel together virtually, to go on those field trips, because they were very instrumental to me.
Yeah, I fully agree. I'll look into seeing how we could do those type of road trips. That would be great. I would also be very much open to traveling to places. I still have a lot of miles on United, so I'd be willing to come into someone's company. I used to do a Agile About Business series and visiting different companies. I visited Amazon. I visited a couple of different other companies, and I recorded that. But it would be nice to be able to capture those vignettes again. And I'm very much open to these types of field trips. It would be great. Any last minute comments by any of the hosts? Just go ahead and shoot. Specifically, I'd like to know what's going on in the world, if there's some place that people can go visit you guys.
I've got a lot of that coming up, so. Yeah. Next week, I mentioned earlier, this is Diana. I mentioned earlier the organization design community. And next week, I will be in Denver for the annual Organization Design Forum conference. And then starting in June and July, I'm going to be around Switzerland, Austria, Germany for a number of different conferences and events. And I have open time. So I would love to meet people who attend this podcast and have coffee, or if you'd like to invite me into your organization, we could figure that out too. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me about that, please do.
I'd like to thank everyone for your participation today. You can listen to it at acnpodcast.org or on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I can keep going down the list of different podcast services that are there. Look for the Agile Community Network and give it a like. I'd like to again thank the sponsors of the show. Could not do this without you, as well as my co-hosts. I couldn't do it without you as well. Episode 100 to me is, again, this is one of the longest gigs that I've done. And I have met so many great people through this medium. It has been very special for me. And I know that this is the high point of my month. And I can tell you that coming together each time is very special for me. Our next live event is May 23rd. I'd like to again thank everyone, and I wish you all a happy month. The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.